Hello there. If you're watching this, it's probably because I've either run out of guests or, more likely, I'm probably taking a break and could be on holiday somewhere. So I have some specially curated videos for you. They are basically some of the shorts that I've created over the past few months, i.e. cut down versions of Business Jam Live. So I hope you like them, and I'll be back with you shortly with real live guests. In this version of Business Jam Shorts, I have some little video clips with guests Scott McArthur and Simon Raybould, and we've had a look at things like introducing creativity with an interesting version of Dragon's Den, using and abusing food, and also writing in odd places, followed by how we might make creativity systematic, why it's illogical to be logical, and performance monitoring and some of its pitfalls.
A lot of the big consultancy companies, they're packed with very clever people, but they're not packed with people from across the magisteria, as I said earlier. So one of the things that I did, and it was great fun, we had I was asked to work with 30 of the sales guys in one of these companies, and I had to help them with their pitching and help them get their messages clear, and we had an artist in there as well, helping them visualize what their products looked like, etc. But we then pulled a fast one. The chief executive, she's called Ursula, she's still there, and her and I sat down and we said, we need to give these guys something challenging. So what we did was we did a Dragon's Den. Now that isn't a clever idea, everybody's done that sort of thing, but what we didn't tell them, so these 30 people all walked in and they had to present their piece to the Dragon's Den. There was me, Ursula, and a couple of other technical guys on the panel. But what they didn't know was that we'd invited their families to be the audience. And by goodness, you have never seen 30 people's faces change completely, ashen. And it was so interesting because they couldn't BS. They had to watch acronyms because some wee boy would say, "Excuse me, Daddy, what does that mean?" And they really had to know their stuff. And I'll tell you what, that's one of the best events I've ever been at, because it really put these people under real pressure that they didn't expect, and ideas came out, mate. It was brilliant. It just kept coming out, because they were challenged they were met by a different audience. So based on that, we then used to bring, and I remember having one we went and had a partnership with the National Opera down at Covent Garden in London, and we got the opera singers to be the audience. So we really went for it. We went for different types of people, and it was terrific. I'm very, very proud of that work.
But have you ever used food? That's what I want to know.
Food, I have. Yeah, I have used food, and twice. We used to have a thing called Walk and Talk, WOK and Talk. And what we did was we hired the place, these teriyaki places, the ones with the chef, and we would actually try it with food to make, what food, what would be the dish be for this meeting? What would the dish be for this company? So it's not quite as creative as perhaps art is, but the walk and talk thing worked because what we did was we gave them a challenge, and they had to go and talk about the challenge, but then they had to instruct the chef on what dish to make. That was the talk part of it. So it was walk and talk. So we did that mainly. That was again mainly in the technology world, but I also did it with some retail companies. So yeah, we did it in music. So we've done it with music quite a lot, and we both know some people that
we do indeed
need to do that. Yeah.
I accidentally did it once with food. I didn't intend to. It was at an association of MBAs event which I organised, and I've been doing this thing about modeling organizations, and most people, you do it with you can do it with Lego, you can do it with all sorts, whatever. I just had a load of stuff there for people to model their organization with, not intending for them to use any particular thing. And it was before we had the buffet, but the buffet was there in the room,
right?
And as with these things, you don't tell people what to do, but if they go off and do it, you just let them. and they did all their modelling with the buffet. There was sausages on sticks and sandwiches and
Excellent.
little sort of
Excellent.
like cocktail umbrellas and
Yes.
all sort. But if people want to do that, the other thing that people love is writing where they shouldn't.
Yes, absolutely. I've done that
I,
as well. Yeah.
I came across a company who are into cardboard packaging,
Right.
anything from like thin packaging for Mars bars in supermarkets,
Yeah.
to industrial crates for car engines. And
Right.
so what we did, we cleared all the furniture out of the room we were using,
Yeah.
and they actually made for us cardboard tables and cardboard chairs
Wow. Right.
and
Okay.
a cardboard ideas wall, amongst other things. But the
Yes.
point was, anything then could be written on, and they loved it. They'd write on the tables, and the people love it.
Brilliant. I remember again, Greg and I, we got into trouble once because we had this big fancy office in the centre of London, and there was actually there's a chap called Gar Reynolds. Now Gar's off having family at the moment, but he wrote a book called Presentation Zen, and in that book he spoke about exactly what you've just described. And so me and Greg decided we were going to write on the windows. So we're up in this big tower block in London. We got the right sort of pens, so that you could rub them out. But we did our whole analysis. It was an Olympic Games thing we were working on, and we did our whole analysis on the windows and left it overnight. And the next morning, we got called into the office and got a telling off from one of the partners because the cleaners were complaining that they had to clean the windows. But fortunately, Greg had taken a photograph of of the work. But actually, it was really interesting. I tell you what was the most interesting part, Derek, was Greg and I were used to working together. That was fine. But the most interesting part was the number of people in the office that came up and said, "What are you guys doing?"
Mm.
It sparked that,
Yeah.
curiosity thing. What's Scott doing over there? I'm going to go and ask him. So they did. And of course, they then started to add to the picture. So
Yeah.
again, a bit like the art piece earlier, it was quite neat.
Creative cultures and system businesses, it comes about because with a lot of my clients at the moment, when I'm talking to them about designing presentations, explaining things, communicating to their audiences in general, no matter how they communicate to them, they look at me like I'm a little bit bonkers and go, yeah, but that's all a wee bit sort of woo-woo and crazy. No, we're accountants. We can't be doing that. We're a local authority. We can't be doing that. We're a computer code and design program. We serious internet security stuff. We can't be doing creative. And I was banging my head against a brick wall until it was actually my wife pointed something out to me a while back. She has a degree in music and she has seen some of Beethoven's working notebooks. And she tells a story where one of her lecturers points out that even Beethoven, arguably one of the greatest and most creative composers of all time, even Beethoven wrote some crap and had a system. And once you realize that even creative professionals have a system, you're in a position then to be able to free yourself up to go, okay, so what is that system? And then you can go, and how can I make that system design proof so I can fit it into the kind of organizations that think in very, very A, B, C, D sequential ways, where they're not in a position to be able to take risks and all of that kind of jazz.
Just talking about notebooks very, very quickly, was Beethoven's system purely to do with the creation of stuff, or was it because the reason I ask is because Leonardo da Vinci was supposedly one of the world's most curious people, and he still exists somewhere. His notebooks and sketches, hundreds and hundreds of them, filled with. Nonsense. He just went off at a tangent, and it wasn't just helicopter designs and things like that. It was also lists of people that he actually wanted to speak to. He had a to-do list of interesting people to speak to. So I wonder if Beethoven did the same.
He had a to-do list of about 5 centuries worth of material. It must have been crazy inside his head. I honestly don't know. The trigger point there was the idea that it was possible to systematize it, not what actually Beethoven's system was. That just made me realize that you could systematize it. So I can't speak to Beethoven's system. What I can speak to is what most people in the creative industries do now, which is to differentiate between, and I think this is what's sitting behind your question, to differentiate between creative process, coming up with the ideas, filling your notebook, and then picking an idea and executing on that idea. And the reason that people in the creative industries have the reputation for being flaky is that they tend not to do that last bit. They concentrate on create, and they ignore this bit. What people in systems industries need is this bit. And you execute on a creative idea in exactly the same way as you execute on your bog standard traditional idea. Once you've created a zillion ideas and put them in your literal or your metaphorical notebook, just like Leonardo did, then you just pick the one that you think is the most appropriate and run that through your project management system, just like any other damned idea. Or at least less stressful.
Yeah, actually, for anybody who's listening who may not have heard of her, there's a lady called Nadia Zeksembayeva who goes on at great length.
Bless you.
Yeah, she goes on at great length about reinvention. She talks about reinvention rather than innovation because people have hijacked the term innovation. But she has a system of planning, and it's not an exact system of planning. Your strategy, your end point could be we want to increase profits by 10% plus or minus 5% next year. So everything has got tolerances on it, but you have regular reviews like you might do with some of the more agile things. But as long as you're meeting your key targets, you can still build this, I suppose, slightly wobbly tower and make progress in the future. Otherwise, you just stop doing things. And I suggest if people are interested, they have a look at the Reinvention Society, maybe buy a book or look at her videos because it's interesting.
And there's something we do, and I've heard of quite a lot, which builds on that for even things like key performance indicators or personal development plans and all of that kind of jazz. You go in to see your boss, and the boss says, "What are your ideas for the next 5 years or next year?" And you've got 5 of them, and you go, "Well, right." And it counts as a victory the next year if you have achieved any 3 of those 5, because that gives you something to aim for. And it gives you that wiggle room so that if you can't manage that one because, I don't know, you've had a car crash and you can't walk for 3 weeks or something, you can make progress on the others. I'm being facetious about it, but it's the blurriness, the flexibility comes in any 3 out of 5 or any 4 out of 7, or if you see what I mean.
And for those who are into EQ and empowerment and all the rest of it, it's doing exactly that. People can make their own decisions.
Yeah. So there's a friend of mine, a guy called Jeff Nicholson, who talks about, well, he has a whole system for this, but he talks a lot about improving self, health, wealth, yada, yada. He's got a whole checklist that makes a really sexy acronym. If you try and make progress on all of those things in a year, you are completely, you're hiding to nothing. But it's been a successful year if you have improved 4 of the 7, for example. I mean, so long as the other 3 haven't gone hysterically backwards, progress on 4 out of 7 and the other 3 have held the same, that still counts as a win. It doesn't matter which of those you do. So the next year, you might work on a different 4 out of the 7. Obviously, 4 out of 7 means there will be at least one overlap.
There will be an overlap somewhere.
Yes, mathematically, yes, there will be at least one overlap. But you get the point I'm trying to make.
So the burning question then is, unless we're sort of very, very keen, that's what we do in our home lives. We don't say, "Oh, I'm going to decorate the lounge, I'm going to decorate the kitchen, and this, that, and the other, and I'm going to change the engine on the car and do the garden and expect to have it all done." So why on earth do we do it in the workplace?
I don't know. I have a horrible suspicion it's because we do that because everybody else does that, and everybody else is doing that because we're doing that, which brings me back to this idea of putting innovation and creativity, that's the keyword creativity, into a system that can sit inside businesses that think like that.
So here's another interesting question for you. Given that we've created the almost created the organization of the future, and this is what you're doing with the real people who do the work. What are the messages you're telling their managers? Because a lot of them will go will scream and go, not that stuff. What do you tell them? How do you get them doing it?
It's not as difficult as you think, because I just float something at them, which is really simple. If what you're doing ain't working, is it sensible to carry on doing the same thing, or should you try doing something different? Now, the logical answer to that one, using their logical processes, is we should try doing something different. At the moment, what you're doing is a logical incremental change approach, and that's not working for you. What is the alternative to a logical incremental change approach? A radical approach. Okay, what if I could give you a system for a radical change that didn't scare the crap out of you? It's not a difficult sell, if you like, particularly if they come to me and say things like, we've been to X conferences, Y conferences, Z conferences, we've given presentations, they've been a waste of time because we've spent $2,000 on getting somebody there and $3,000 on accommodation, and it's cost us $5,000 in the time it takes to write the presentation. We haven't got a single booking from it. Nobody's bought anything. It's very easy to say, well, you've just spent $15,000 for a waste of time. Wouldn't you like to try something different? I cannot make the situation any worse than $15K for nothing, can I? And I'm quite an easy sell at that point.